Okay, let's all take a deep breath and clear our minds from wood chipper images and ask the infinite creator to show his loving kindness to our group by infusing love and light from the great pitch of light that Rock says is what we think Christians think of as the Holy Spirit. And Ra must have an English bent if he refers to pitches of anything, I guess, because I think he means field. So we take a deep breath in, breathe in the breath of God, breathe out the cares of the day. We open our heart, mind, and soul to God's guidance through this time. And we move forward with the expectation of glory. Amen.
Amen. Okay. What I'd like to do is provide just a very, very brief introduction to the topic of wanderers, and then kind of talk a little bit about a dialogue. We'll just have a conversation between us. And then I'd like the conversation to include, again, always, how can we live whatever we talk about today in the immediacy of our lives with full hearts and wisdom. So that'll also be important to live as wanderers or whomever we want to live as, but to do so with deep integrity and rootedness here. Okay. Well, I'm going to introduce the topic of wanderers by actually sharing a little bit about my own first encounter with that. Troy knows this, but I'm not sure if many others do. And also, as when you may want to share, then I would be nice if you wanted to share, if you're familiar with the law of one insofar as wanderers and you have a sense of your own relationship to that term, it would be fun to share too. But let me say that this was September the 2nd, 2015. I remember the exact date. And it was in the evening, and we had family over, my wife's sister and husband and their young kid. And my kids were pretty young too. And I was in the other room. I was just finishing up a few things and doing my secret little esoteric studying, because then I didn't want to scare my wife off, being deluded as I am in esoterica. But anyways, I was in the other room, and Troy, that guy right there, he had simply emailed me a very simple subject, and it simply said, mind expanding material. And then the email said, my wife and I have found this to be quite mind expanding, period. And then it was www.llresearch.com.org, I guess. And so I pressed that, and I had no idea what that was. It was an older site. It's not the one that you would get now if you were to press it. But even though I didn't know what I was seeing, except I think it said maybe the law of one at the very top, and who knew what that was. But it was as if somebody took my face and moved it over to the left, upper left corner. There was a subtitle, and it said, "Are you a wanderer?" And it was like, okay, I mean, it was literally, I was being forced, almost like something overtook my body, forced, click. And what I read there was so profound to me that it literally sent me into a new vortex, almost a dimension for 2 hours. What it said was something like, "You are not alone." Just that. Just, "You are not alone," underlined. And then it talked about Ra. Many wanderers are drawn to this material, this law of one material, and basically it was a note of comfort and validation from one wanderer, Carla, to other wanderers who would find the site. And it was suggestive of wanderers being souls who were from other densities, higher densities, not better densities, but densities, more advanced grades of experience. And that these souls had volunteered to undergo a mission. These particular souls were very mission driven as a response to the cries of confusion and pain from Earth's third density. And Ra, in fact, says that their own way of understanding themselves, both the Ra social memory complex, but also the Confederation of which they are a senior member, describes themselves as the brothers and sisters of sorrow. And Ra very poignantly says in one place, "We have walked amongst your people. We have seen your people." And later, I think, says, "We know the pain, or we feel the pain." There's a sense of that, a pain that is this big. And since the one creation is one body, it is as if there's an infection, a wound that must be responded to. Well, one way to respond to these, you could call them prayers, is to wander. These are wanderers. And the goal is to fully incarnate as a third density being, an Earth, third density being completely and totally, with the exception of what Ra talks about is maybe a bias, a shield of light in the spirit complex. So the mind, body, spirit complex. Each one of us is a mind, body, spirit complex. And for wanderers, there is a more access to this sort of pure wholeness, this light, and it can act like a shield, in a sense, shielding the wanderer from maybe the more negative machinations of common day third density Earth experience, to the detriment, I think, of some wanderers who may fall into the martyrdom syndrome, if you will. But wanderers primarily come from, Ross says, the sixth density. So this would be if you could think of it as the sixth chakra of the logos, in a sense, sixth density, having gone through third and fourth and fifth, having come from already an incredibly united organism of being, where a social memory complex, where each individuated entity within a social memory complex is valued as its own entity, its own individuatedness, but completely and totally melded in unity and harmony with other selves inside of this one body. And that is the experience. You think of them as the angelic realm, even. What maybe we can imagine as heaven or something like that can be the experience of sixth density, with the exception, not with the exception, but sixth density beings, it's not like you make it to heaven and you play your golden harp. Ross says that third density is the axis upon which the entire universe moves and turns, and that the higher densities, fourth, fifth, and sixth, act as refining of what happens in third density. So sixth density beings, like fifth and fourth, but very primarily sixth, are like master gardeners that come and garden the consciousness, the fertile field of the earth of consciousness. And it's a lot of work. And one of those works is to be a wanderer. So why was I launched into this almost this other dimension? Well, first off, I cried. I just there was a whole lot of WTF. This is a thing. I had no idea. I'd never encountered star seeds or any of this sort of thing. I was just beginning to dip my toe into um, concepts like reincarnation. And so whenever I saw that we're talking about reincarnation, but we're also immediately talking about aliens and we're immediately talking about planets and service, this was where my mind was blown because I had never mentioned that to Troy, that I was ever into that stuff. But when I was a kid, while other people were, other kids had Playboy or something underneath their mattress or Playgirl, I don't know. But I would have little esoteric magazines on aliens. It was my porn, if you will. I didn't want anybody to know about it. But I was into out of body experiences and telepathy and all these Atlantis and pyramids and all this stuff. Um, and I was embarrassed by it. But this was a thing. I mean, hell, I used to believe that I used to tell people, I used to tell my parents, this is rural Texas, Keller, Texas. And I used to tell my parents, this is first grade after my UFO encounter. I said, guys, I'm really not from here. My dad didn't miss a beat. He's like, yeah, we know. Oh man. They just kind of went along with it. But this is an experience that wanderers have. And I'll finish by stating a couple of things that I think may be commonplace here. I know most of you, and I think I can say this might be true for you. Ra talks about wanderers as having a real difficulty in third density experience. Now, somebody who doesn't believe any of this hooey could easily explain this as neurodivergency or my own need to be special and kind of a grandiose template. And I'm not discounting that either. That might also be overlays on this. But my own experience of it is very, very difficult to be here. Very sensitive. There's the term called hypersensitive people. Very sensitive to energy, moods, able to perceive what is going on under the water in other people, even in first, second grade, but without having the mental capacity to understand, is that different or is that not? I remember, just as an example, I remember when I was in high school in ninth grade, this is after I had given up a little bit more on the esoteric stuff and just focused in on baseball, which I got really good at. But I remember saying, I don't even know what's my sexuality. And I look at all these guys that are in the gym playing football and I'm baseball stud, but it's like, man, this is just, I'm supposed to love this stuff. If I'm a guy in Texas, I'm just supposed to love this stuff. But I like art and music. And it's not like I didn't like baseball, but I'm just saying, like, the deeper religion, spirituality, saints, the mystics, like that's the stuff that I liked. And who was I going to talk to about? Well, when you meet other wanderers, it's already like, aha, my peeps. And so Ross says that many wanderers are here. In 1980 or so, 80, there was, I think, 60 million. I don't know what percentage of the population that was back then. And there was 4 billion, so someone can do the math. 60 million of 4 billion. So I think it's like 4% or something. I think there's more wanderers now, but most wanderers these days are coming from fourth density. So the sixth density wanderers were here in waves, uh, helping to bring in some of some of the industrial revolution. Einstein, Ross says, was a wanderer. Nikola Tesla was a wanderer. Um, you get these different waves that come in prep and prep. I would assume Carl Jung is. A lot of this perennial tradition is being introduced back into third density zeitgeist by uh, either people who are wanderers or kind of within the purview of certain wanderers coming in. And now I think the wanderer is less important in what we do and more important about doing internal work, and then radiating that out in our day-to-day ways of being. So lastly, when I had this vortex of dimensional vortex, I sat in silence in the dark with tears coming down for 2 hours. I would occasionally go in to my family. And it's like, I'm still here. And then I withdraw back. And I had a Kundalini experience that night. I had a full on rising of the energy and then a popping up at the top of my head. And for about 3 weeks afterwards, there was an entire energetic shift that just, I can't really explain it. If you've had a Kundalini, you know. So that was the inauguration of me. Hadn't even read the Law of One yet, except for that one little piece wandering, and then launched into the Law of One with fervor. So I'd like to stop here and first off, thank you for letting me chat a bit about this. Hopefully this is an interesting topic, and I'd be interested to hear and have a conversation. Tim, you had your microphone off first, and then Elizabeth, you want to share after that?
Yeah, thank you, Doug. I really appreciate it. Hello, everyone. My name's Tim. I'm a wanderer. Nice
Hi,
to meet
Tim.
you. Long before I encountered the Law of One, I've always had a seeker's spirit. And I think looking back, I was searching for the lingua franca of the Logos, which I think we might agree is love and light. But I just wanted to share, based on this beautiful introduction that you gave, Doug, some words that were written 200 years ago that I'm sure you're all familiar with, which I think may be the mantra for wanderers, written by Wordsworth, who said, "Our birth is a sleep and a forgetting. The soul that rises with us, our life's star, hath had elsewhere its setting and cometh from afar. Not in entire forgetfulness and not in utter nakedness, but trailing clouds of glory do we come from God, who is our home." And so much of life, we come from maybe holier spheres where these social memory complexes are so nurturing. And like, I just loved reading your most recent post, Doug, that talked about the security that we long for here on earth. And all my life, I've looked around and seen the inequality and have experienced a lot of depression and grief over why the earth is so terrible. Not understanding that perhaps some of that may be the incongruency between where we've come from, but how great it is that, among you and others who are searching for the love and the light, we come home again. So thank you.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you, Tim. Elizabeth, you're on mute.
Yeah, no, I just clicked off of it, but I think I'll pass for the moment. I'd love to hear from other people, for
Mm.
sure. I don't know whether I'm a wanderer or not. I have no idea. I just know I've been on this journey following this little thread that's gone on for many years, basically since about 6 years old. And
I'm not sure they let Presbyterians be wanderers.
You have to get a dispensation from Calvin.
Exactly. Yeah, maybe that's what puts the question in my head. Who knows? Gets stuck in your head. So I'll mute myself again and listen.
Barbara had her hand up.
Barbara and then Duncan.
Okay.
Barbara?
Oh, everybody froze, and then I had to
Oh,
back in and out. So, can you hear me?
yeah. Yes.
Okay. Okay. So last Tuesday, when you basically the part that hit home for me was we were talking a little bit about what you had under the, I think you labeled it handicaps for the wanderer, and I thought, oh wow, that was Tuesday. I said Troy and I kind of had a little bit of a conversation about that Saturday, talking a little bit about the aloneness of. That I had been kind of experienced and always kind of experienced. You do feel alone. You feel like you're the only one. I don't know, like you don't fit. And when I read the Wanderer's Handbook, I mean, I've just soaked it all up. And the couple of things that came out of that is they said one of the most common characteristics of wanderers, the vibrational mismatch between their subconscious memory and disharmony of this world, can lead to a deep-seated sense of alienation. Like I don't belong here. This place is insane. And the other thing, because I've talked this over and over and over about being here, I feel like I'm just here to learn how to heart.
Barbara,
And they do talk about that. That's one to have in common is to learn how. Am I picking up?
yeah. Maybe try getting off and coming back on. We missed half of that. And I'm going to ask Duncan to weigh in, and then if we can circle back to you once you get reconnected. Sorry about that. Duncan?
Yeah, sure. So, one thing that you mentioned that resonated with me, I think you said something along the lines of, as wanderers, one of the first things that we need to do is to do that internal work. Is that, do you recall what I'm, yeah. So,
Yeah, that's very important.
yeah. So through, I would say where in your research, you really delved into the law of one stuff. In my research, after my Kundalini experience, whenever I was in ninth grade or so, or actually, no, I was a senior in high school. I really delved into Advaita Vedanta, which is like kind of an Eastern tradition of spirituality. And in that time, I watched a lot of what are called satsangs, which is essentially where you have an enlightened person up on stage, and you have a bunch of seekers, are what they called, asking the enlightened one questions. And it's just an hour or 2 hour long session like that. And I've probably watched hundreds of hours of people having these satsangs. And every time I hear a seeker ask the enlightened one on stage, and it could be, various different teachers, various different gurus, or whether they're Western or Eastern, every time these seekers ask the question, what's something that I can do to benefit the world? And every single time, the enlightened one says, find out who you are. That is the best thing you can do for this planet. And I think that speaks a lot of truth for wanderers, especially people who came here to help, because if you lack the understanding of what you truly are, then even though you may be doing something in the spirit of helping, you may unintentionally be hurting somebody. For example, you may have a friend who has a drug problem or an alcohol problem or something like that, and they ask you for money. Wisdom would say, if they're on the right path, if they're stopped taking drugs and they stop drinking, then yeah, sure, help them out with money. But if they haven't, then maybe it's a good idea that you not do that, because you could be hurting them in that instance. But I don't know, just wanted to share that.
Oh, thank you. Wise words there from Duncan. Incredibly important. In fact, Law of One says, Ra says, know yourself, know yourself. Socrates, know yourself. That same idea. Understand who you are, the internal imbalances, and then love them back into integrity. Yeah.
Exactly. And if I can have one more small tidbit, the essence of that is to essentially develop the understanding of what you are in this universe and how you should help this universe within yourself. And then and only then are you able to radiate that out in an efficient and direct manner to those that need to hear it.
Yeah, the nuance I'd want to provide there is often we don't really discover our full mission unless it's done in relationship. I think we have to have that curiosity to seek inward, but at the same time, it's through relationality that we really find and get honed more into our own ministry. So I think you're right, but it's got to be done in a relational context. Of course, having a
One of the
relationship
best
with
ways
yourself.
to minister to yourself in the darkness is to serve other people.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't want to just sit there in the darkness all the time. You want to go do some service.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very true.
That's why Richard Rohr said action and contemplation, but action comes first. Interesting. I wanted to ask DeMarcus to weigh in, because I know you actually led a wanderer presentation a couple of years ago here. So I'd love to hear your story.
Yeah, so I mean, pretty much my story is very parallel to yours, Doug. Growing up, was always into the alien stuff, spiritual, out of body. Always felt like I fit in, but that I didn't fully fit in, and then wasn't necessarily from here. Um, and then, around 15, 16, I kind of had like a spiritual awakening, and I went on this spiritual journey, and that all culminated in my finding of the Law of One, I would say about 10 years later. And then just raw, I was attracted to it. And then the information from it was just so easy to digest for me. It was like I was learning from an old friend. Wasn't hard for me to understand. It was easy for me to regurgitate it and then explain it to people in a way that they could understand pretty easily. So Raw's commentary on Wanderers and just the things that the Confederation has said just really resonated with me. And it confirmed everything that I had always believed. And it has definitely empowered my journey and kind of given me a reminder of why I'm here. There are definitely days for sure, where I do feel the incompatibility of the vibrations. There are days where I'm just like, as soon as I die, I want to get my Wanderer's license revoked and never do this job again. But at the same time, thanks to Raw and thanks to the channelings and the Confederation, I'm also reminded that this catalyst isn't available. This catalyst, I'm getting more out of this experience than I probably could ever imagine. In that after this life, I'll probably be jumping to try and reincarnate again. But everything from the Raw contact just definitely really resonated with me and it's caused me to really turn inward and go deeper. I remember being a kid, taking the radio outside with an antenna, putting foil on the tip of the antenna and turning the station to kind of like one of those in between stations with nothing and listening for alien signals. And then just to come, full circle to learn that I'm the alien. I've been the alien the whole time. So it's definitely really been a journey, and it continues to be a journey every day. So,
DeMarcus, I'm going to ask you a question that'll probably just show you just how big of a damn white boy I am. But my question goes like this: is in the Black community, did you feel even more alienated? There's such an underrepresentation as far as I'm concerned, underrepresentation of my BIPOC folks in these kinds of spiritual communities. And so I'm just curious, like, what was that like for you as a white or a black male here in Texas?
I would say at first, yes, especially, like the younger years, especially like elementary school. But as I grew, and as I became friends with more people, it almost seemed like they were kind of in a similar spot, maybe not necessarily as advanced or for a long. And I believe that I'm a millennial, so a lot of millennials are wanderers, and I believe that I grew up with a lot of people who are wanderers. And so even with, in the black people and within the black community, there are a lot of spiritual people that were, yeah, they may have been Christian, but they were also into maybe, a wider picture or a wider view of that. Even my mom herself is, very upright Christian woman, but she's always believed in reincarnation. She's always had an open mind in things. And so I've always haven't really necessarily felt too alienated within that.
But you have felt alienated. Sorry.
Yes, exactly.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. That's great. I'm so glad that our paths have crossed. Really. Okay, somebody else to weigh in.
Barbara's back. Go ahead.
I was thinking about what you said, Doug, when you sent us the text about the subject, and it made me wonder, like maybe we are all wanderers here, coming together. I notice in other groups that I meet that most of us aren't with our partners. We're just singled out when we go to these groups, but to me, it's not important if I am a wanderer or not. I don't even know if I am. It's not important to me, but it has made me think a lot. But losing my train of thought. I've been studying the Course in Miracles, and it's just like the law of one almost. All these things have come to light, and I just think I'm here to learn. Even though sometimes I feel like people do not understand me the way I think. And I've come to understand that this is how they're learning, and they're on their journey and I'm on my journey. And I don't know. It's making me think a lot. Thank you for listening.
Yeah. Before I ask Barbara to weigh back in, I just want to say you bring up a good point. My relationship with the phenomena of wanderers goes like this. It has been incredibly validating for me personally. And on the other hand, I don't care. um, and so I hope that it's a healthy detachment. It doesn't negate my own experience of that phenomena, but I think if I could argue, uh, people who are really wanderers kind of don't care in the end because there's only one thing to do, and that's to do who you are with just full embodiment, which is what wanderers are wanting to do anyways. Yeah. So I'm honoring that piece that you just said, that very humble piece. Barbara, would you mind finishing up, please?
And I'm not sure where I left.
Well, you had talked about Troy, and you were speaking about how hard it is,
Yeah,
the incongruity.
yeah, and I remember sharing that at least what would had been happening for those last couple of weeks was feeling. I was just feeling everything. It was almost like when I went out anywhere to be around, I guess whatever's outside of the walls of this home, very intense. and literally physically making me sick in various ways. So extremely sensitive to more than usual what I have been as I've walked this path of life. Very sensitive to, as what was said in the Wanderer's Handbook, the different vibrations that are out there. And in this way, in this case of that 2 weeks, it kind of felt more of the collective versus maybe an individual person that all of a sudden I can feel this intense, I'm just going to call it suffering or pain or something going on with that particular person. It could be with even a plant, or it could even be with an animal. Anyway, I just wanted to stay inside. So yeah, it is a difficult journey, and you do all of a sudden, for me, feel very alone. And because in a way I was isolating at that point in time. And it's true, you can't just share this kind of thing with just anybody. They don't understand. My husband listens and understands, but I don't know. It's been a difficult journey for me, as you know, Doug, and Troy knows too. Just been very, very difficult. And I'm kind of like with Marcus occasionally. I go, don't send me back. I'm not coming. But then on the other hand, you think of all the beautiful gifts and opportunities the rest get to experience in this life, as for me, learning to open my heart and give and receive love, and let the shields down, so to speak, because to let it in and out. It's just been difficult to navigate, and I'm still learning. And some weeks are really, really tough, and those couple of weeks there had been really tough. Better now, but boy, it was something else. Even hard to describe. And I know Peter and I have had some discussions on desensitivity, so I'm hoping maybe he'll share too in his journey on what he picks up. I don't know if he will do that or not, but
well, nothing like just throwing the mic at old Pete over here.
Peter,
I like it.
Yeah, we got to get him off his couch. Anyway.
Okay. Well, thank you, Barbara.
Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you.
Look, I appreciated what everyone said. I particularly relate to Duncan because I, for better or worse, come out of a Vedic culture, and a lot of my guy pals have been Advaita Vedanta monk types of people. Some are monks to these days, so we often have these discussions. But a couple things, living in an ashram type community, kind of an open community, and the uniqueness of this, and also doing hundreds and hundreds of astrology charts. So it's sort of like being a therapist a little bit. You're hearing the inner workings and story of someone. It's given me some perspective along with my own evolution. I guess a couple thoughts came to me. One is I really relate to the idea of feeling separated or not of this world. I don't know if I can use the word disassociation. Doug would have a better, and Troy would have a better idea of what disassociation is, whether that is this sense of alienation. There can be something that's not healthy about it, and then something that's very sensitive about it. But two things come to my mind. The first is that we could say we feel that we're not from here, and this is not our world, but we are to be here, or we wouldn't be here. And that goes to, we're here, and to be here means to get to know yourself, because ultimately everything's perfect and everything's synchronized with everything else. I also think that, I've come to look at people in different ways in the evolutionary spiral that's going on. And, one thing I've seen with what I call seekers or wanderers is that they're releasing. So and other people are more involved, and it's not like everyone is integrated. All aspects of humanity happen at once in someone. Certain features more dominate someone's evolution, but some people are releasing and purifying, and that's their role on Earth. And when you release and purify, it's becoming more unifying. So you may come in initially and feel more alienated and more empathy, more pain. There may be personal challenges, but that is purification, and the way to deal with it is to become bigger, to become more into the universal self. So a lot of people that are on spiritual paths have allergies, autoimmune disease, have personality things they're working with, and that's one thing I've observed. And their job is to release and purify the society. Other people accumulate more. They're here you got to keep the earth spinning around. Everyone can't be, dissolving into the absolute. And so some people are here to fulfill desires and to accumulate and to create and collect. And you say, oh my God, that person's so lucky. They eat this, they do that, they're rich, they, have a lot of boyfriends or girlfriends or whatever. They never get sick. They look great all the time. Well, that's their dharma, is to kind of, accumulate and to achieve and to create. And so that's kind of a simple way of looking at it in some ways.
Yeah. Thank you. Before we get to Nathan, I just want to say that Ross says the path really is know yourself, accept yourself, and become the creator, become all that there is. So when you said universal self, that was just right on point. Thank you so much for sharing. Okay, Nathan.
Just to piggyback off something you said there, Peter, about disassociation, and stick with the quote because it starts off sounding really rough. But this is 80.11 questioner. Could you say then that implicit in the process of becoming an adept and the possible partial polarization towards service to self, because simply the adept becomes disassociated with many of his kind or like in that particular density which he inhabits. This is likely to occur. The apparent happening is disassociation, whether the truth is service to self or thus true disassociation from other selves, or service to others and thus true association with the heart of all other selves, and disassociation only from the illusory husks which prevent the adept from correctly perceiving the self and other self as one. Here, I'll post the quote in the chat. It's a bit dense.
Yeah. Nathan, do you want to just open that up and describe it a little bit, or I can do it just to kind of give it in good old Texas, or give it English?
Sure. Yeah, you're basically you're seeing the creator within the person. You're disassociating it with the surface personality. You're seeing the indwelling creator of the person. So you're not becoming, upset or angry with the surface personality, person. And yeah, you're just seeing the creator. That's all you're seeing,
Yeah.
really.
And the context of that quote, before that, it was along the lines of the 15th archetype, where the 15th archetype was seen as the devil, and that was the matrix of spirit. And so then it comes about that Ross says, well, people who are on the path of the adept will necessarily go through some kind of initiation where they'll spend a great deal of time, this is my word, in liminal space, where former relationships and bonds may dissipate, and those people would look upon the adept as, oh, he's going down a dark path, we don't know where he's going, this is not good. So there might be some thinking that they're dabbling in darkness or the occult or something. And the adept might actually be a very positive adept along the positive path, but this is a disassociation of the bonds that may not allow the intense polarization that is needed for the adept path. And it can be a time of great loneliness, but it's something that has to be undergone. So it's kind of the Jesus in the desert archetype, if you will. So I wanted to share that. Sirach, did you want to weigh in? You and I've had some conversations, but you just look like you have a big thing to say.
Good evening, everyone. Um, yeah, this is an interesting topic to me. I think because when I reflect on my 36 years of life, I felt a lot of resonance when I was reading about just the wanderer concept. And I think judging by the last 2 weeks of my life, it's just been a hard few weeks and definitely judging on based on how things are going, man. I got probably 15 more rounds on 5 more third density planets because there's no way I'm getting out of this hellhole of being triggered by the people around me. And I I'm just kidding, but I'm not. But I also was thinking that as y'all were sharing, because I feel like the spiritual path is so visceral. And in the midst of that, I have these moments of being triggered. And I relate with what Peter said about being on the path of releasing, because there are people that just remind me of key relationships in my life, family members, childhood experiences. And sometimes when I'm triggered, I will close my eyes and pray and like ask God to show me a memory that this is connected to. And it's almost laughable. Like it makes me smile because I feel underneath these memories is, myself. And that's what I want, just to be free, to love people, to hug people, to see the creator in them. But I think there are just certain people in my life, and dude, they might be wanderers too, now that I think about it, because sometimes I'm so triggered, it's hard for me to look out of it. And so I was, whatever stage, whatever stage of the spiritual path that involves just continually looking within, putting these puzzle pieces together and surrendering it. I feel like I'm definitely there because I feel like when you first learn about the Wanderer, you feel like, shit, man, I'm a part of the freaking Avengers, man. Holy crap, I'm a Wanderer. But then you start realizing, oh my gosh, like I I don't think I'm cut out for this. And then I don't know, you go through all the stages of grief and happiness, but that's kind of what's on my mind, what's been kind of plowing around in there. But I really appreciate what everyone's been sharing.
Oh man, I was in second grade. I remember I was at a waterfall by myself crying and just basically saying, I can't do this. It's too much. It's too much. Yeah, I remember that feeling. Marcus, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just want to note, though, in there, I think it's really interesting. Ross says that wandering, and this has to do with pre-incarnationally before a wanderer incarnates. Ross says that it's contemplated for hundreds of what we consider years. So wanderers, these higher density beings, they look at the situation and they think about it and they contemplate it for hundreds of years before they make the jump. What Ross says that majority of wanderers, like you said, Doug, would be sixth density because they have a higher level of foolhardiness, just because they're more experienced. um, and not only, and then once the decision is made to wander, they have to present their case before the Council of Saturn. So any external influence that desires to make contact with Earthlings have to go through the Council of Saturn, which is kind of like the board of directors for the Confederation. They approve everything; they're their top dogs. So not only do wanderers contemplate it for centuries and they make the decision, they have to lay out their case before the council. And Quo says that not every person who chooses or desires to wander is granted that by the council. And so usually these agreements are multiple lifetimes. And so I think it's just really interesting how it's something, how a big decision is made pre-incarnatively, especially even negative entities won't even wander because they don't want to really lose the polarization and lose the progress that they made. So it's definitely a huge risk, and the contemplation and the approval and just going through all that is just really something interesting that has always stuck with me.
It's probably because wanderers are just ints, and it takes a very Lord of the Rings. Okay, I see Serac smiling. We have time for one more. Anybody want to weigh in?
I just wanted to say I was wandering on 635 recently and just felt like even that decision to come here and drive on 635 was I probably had to take a few centuries of time space to make that decision. That's all.
Yeah, and you are blessed for it. You've just raised the vibrations of the planet so much higher. You were wandering around. I blessed you. You're right. Anybody else? Troy.
I love being odd person out in this group because I don't have any of those alienation from Earth feelings that are hallmarks of the wanderer. And I've always felt like I was a Earthling who might have been here long enough to be ready to go to the next level, but maybe not as a wanderer. I don't know. Just saying. Um, and I'm just a regular Earthling.
Well, even and Carla said any Earthling, whomever, we're all Earthlings that have got to a point where this stuff would be of interest, would be wanderers in a sense that you're not going to be understood, and the seeking is intense. Well, thank you everybody for sharing. Danny, did you want to weigh in? I feel like you don't have to. I just always have wisdom.
Well, I'm an Enneagram 4, and I think kind of a mediatrix soul. I feel like whatever's gone on for me, mine was out of pain and survival. That at 17 I went through a really super tough anxiety attack that lasted forever. I thought I was going crazy, thought I was going to die, and eventually recovered from that. And then I did have had those times in life when, yeah, 1987, when everything changed around me. 86, so strangely, I was kind of on a night sea journey through a divorce. I ended up basically almost on Troy's doorstep, and he kind of nurtured me through to, to kind of strengthen that veil, or what he has, kind of that membrane between conscious and unconscious. And then that went on to another journey, and I ended up really into channeled works and like Course in Miracles. And when I found Course of Love, which I feel like was a continuation, a good thing, I went to Troy one day in 2016. I hadn't hardly seen him in about 10 years. And he said, well, Dan, if you're into channeled works, there's one that has the least amount of ego contamination if you want to take a look at the Law of One. And so, that starts kind of a whole nother type of journey. So, and I would say in 2008, all that resolved in this really full-blown anxiety experience of much loss, another divorce. My dog had died. I'd found him dead on the back patio. And then on this one, maybe it was a little more like a Kundalini or something, because I finally just gave up, and this incredible energy buoyed me up that was the benevolence of the universe. And I could feel and know it so clearly. And so my journey, I think, has been similar to a wanderer, but yeah, kind of my alienation has always been like, I just feel like I'm on a path that just takes me from one thing to another, and I find a group like this that feels like home. And Yeah, but as Peter says too, I think this is all a real process of cleansing, purification that's sometimes personal, sometimes feels archetypal, or for the collective. And I think we're all at such a, as Cynthia Bourgeault says, the beginning of a second axial age here that we're all participating in, that's so incredibly powerful and important for these movements that we're going through in consciousness and I think in evolution. And they're tiny stages, but they have major steps in our souls to make. So I'm thankful for this group and thankful for Troy. My goodness. I don't know what I'd done without him. So anyway.
You see the power you have, Troy? If you're a third density being, but you're the aircraft for all these jets that just land and breathe and get refueled. So
I am that.
I don't know. All right, well, let's close it up. Thank you guys for sharing. Next week we're going to do prayer intentions and catalysts. So hopefully you'll come back. Who would like to close this down? I can do it. I'll do it this time now. Loving and wonderful Creator, you've given us the gift of being here, and we, and our meager yes to be here, work in participation of the grand divine will to seek ever more intense experience and bring it to moments of crescendo and exquisite beauty. But beauty is never beauty unless there's some tragic elements, asymmetrical element to it. And so we just are grateful that we're both beloved and pierced. And we give this gift of wholeness to others in solidarity. And it's your spirit in us doing this. We thank you for this group and bless all of us this week. Amen. Okay, friends, God bless. We'll see you